Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Peter Johnson, longtime history economics teacher and swim coach in the Kenosha area. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Carl, for having me.
Okay. So when did your family come to Kenosha?
My dad's family, they were in the Bristol area in the 1830s. My great-great-grandparents settled there. They had a farm across from the Spring Valley Country Club on Highway C and 83 or 45 or something out there. And my grandmother's grandmother married a guy and came from Bristol into Kenosha. And they were here in Kenosha from, the 1850s or so. And so, I mean, it's a long time. My mother was from New York. She was born and raised in Manhattan. She met my dad after World War II. She was an Army nurse. He was a fighter pilot during World War II. So he was from Kenosha.
Oh, okay. So your great-grandparents owned a farm in Bristol.
It was actually great.
Okay. Then your great-grandparents, what did they do? Did they off the farm?
Blacksmiths.
Blacksmith.
He was a blacksmith here in town. In fact, at the History Center, most of the blacksmith tools were his tools, donated. I donated them from the family collection. I had no use for them. In fact, most of them I didn't even know how to use them, so it was best to put them on display at the History Center.
Okay. So then your great-great-grandparents went from farming to a great-grandparent who was a blacksmith. Then your grandparents, what did they do?
My real grandfather died from tuberculosis when my dad was 4.5. He was the international sales manager of the Bain Wagon Company, and during World War I, he sold like 1,200 wagons to the French government. He passed in 1925. His father was the last general superintendent of the Bain Wagon Company, so they were involved with the Bain Wagon Company. My dad ended up being a health officer here in the city of Kenosha. My mother was a registered nurse here in Kenosha.
And your grandfather, on your dad's side, what did he do?
My dad's stepfather had a meat market and slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse was out on Highway 50, located across from the IHOP restaurant, and then his last market was downtown Kenosha, where the building that preceded the present creative space. It's 624 57th Street.
Okay. So you mentioned that your parents met after World War II.
After World War II.
And your mom was from Manhattan. Did they live in New York then after they got married?
No. My mother met my dad when he was, after the war, he was at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And she was stationed at Fort Dix, New Jersey afterwards. And they met, they got married December 25th, 1947, here in Kenosha. At that time, my dad was stationed down in Montgomery, Alabama, and at the Maxwell Air Force Base.
Okay, and how did they come to live in Kenosha?
Well, after the war, the farm manager for my grandfather's slaughterhouse went to work at Nash, and my grandparents needed somebody to help out. There was a labor shortage after the war, and so they came back to Kenosha and managed the farm, managed the slaughterhouse.
Okay, and how long did that last?
Till 1955.
Okay.
And then that's when he went and went to work for the Kenosha Health Department.
Okay. And then you went to school here, obviously.
Oh, yes. Started in 4-year-old kindergarten at Roosevelt. Miss Edith Noling was my 4-year-old kindergarten teacher and beginning of my 5-year-old kindergarten teacher. And we were living on the farm out in Pleasant Prairie. At that time, Pleasant Prairie and the city of Kenosha schools were separate, and there was no kindergarten for Pleasant Prairie. So my parents paid tuition for me to go to kindergarten at Roosevelt. And in fact, Dr. Turner's daughter, Lacey Turner, also lived in Pleasant Prairie, and she too, her parents too, paid tuition for Lacey to go to 4-year-old kindergarten and 5-year-old kindergarten.
And so
at
did you
Roosevelt.
continue in elementary at Roosevelt?
When my parents finally found a house, after the war, housing was short. There was shortage of housing, and they found a house to buy in the Sunnyside neighborhood. They bought the house, paid cash for it, no mortgage, and we moved into that in the Sunnyside neighborhood in March of, I guess, 1957, when I was near the end of kindergarten. Then I started going to the Sunnyside Elementary School, which is now Grevenall.
Okay, and then you continued to
I
the south
continued
sides.
all the way through elementary school, the rest of the elementary school at Sunnyside. Then I went over to Lance, and I spent 3 years at Lance. Then from Lance, I went to Tremper, and
When did you graduate?
a long time ago. The first time I graduated from Tremper was in 1969. I tell people the second time I graduated was in 2007. That's when I retired.
Okay. And so what kind of interests did you have as a child, getting into middle school and late elementary years?
Oh, and it was focused on swimming.
Swimming?
It was focused on swimming. When I was in second grade, I was involved in an automobile accident that sort of wrecked my back, and Dr. Chet Sattler said he needs to swim. And so I did a lot of swimming, plenty of swimming. And, I swam competitively from the second grade all the way through college.
Okay. And how did you go about getting into college? Did your swimming help you get to college?
Oh,
Or
yes.
What did you want to do when you grew up? I mean,
Well, in junior high school, my social studies teacher was also my counselor in 8th grade, Bob Saxvig. And he sat down and he asked, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd like to become a surgeon. And he, at that time, he said, well, Peter, you're very, very good in social studies, and you're great in swimming. Why don't you think about becoming a social studies teacher and a swimming coach? And I thought, oh, that sounds good. In retrospect, I think he did not want me to become a surgeon here in town and end up cutting on him. So that's why he ended up suggesting the teacher route.
okay, and you followed through on that.
I followed through on that.
So, was it hard getting into school? Did you use your swimming to get into college? How did you
know,
decide where you were going?
Throughout my career, I was able to share with all athletes that it was important that if you liked a sport and you were interested in going to a school, that you should contact the coach of that sport at that school to be able to get, you're special. You're not just one of hundreds or thousands. You are one of, one of a few.
So how did you pick the school you chose?
Well, I ended up, what I ended up doing was I looked and I looked and I looked. I looked at Illinois State, Normal, Illinois. I looked at the University of Montana, at Missoula. I looked at Whitewater, and the May of my senior year, I had some friends that were upperclassmen at Tremper, but I think they were sophomores at Oshkosh, and they suggested that I come and end up coming in and look at Oshkosh. And I looked at Oshkosh and I liked what I saw. It was far enough away from home, but close enough where it didn't spend 3-4 days back and forth. Normal Illinois is not just a hop, skip, and a jump, and Missoula definitely isn't a hop, skip, and a jump. But Oshkosh is. It was. I was able to experience college life.
And did you contact the swim coach at Oshkosh before?
Of course, I did.
And how did that go?
That went well. I mean, when the weekend that I went to visit the school, I met the swim coach, and I decided I would go to Oshkosh, and I signed up, and throughout. For freshmen, they have freshman orientation sessions. Swim coach made it a point that I was in the first freshman orientation session. So, he was there guiding. He was a great mentor.
Okay. And then you swam competitively all through college?
All the way through college.
And graduated from college in what year?
1974.
Okay. And were you still working with the swim coach when you graduated, or did you?
I took the 5-year plan.
Okay.
So I swam all 4 years. The 5th year I was his assistant, and I helped out with practicing. I helped out. I'm trying to think. In the '68 Olympics, he was one of the diving coaches for the United States, and I can remember. I don't know much about diving, and at one meet he said, "You're going to officiate. You're going to judge this. You're going to be representing Oshkosh as the judge." And I go, "Coach, I don't know anything about it." And he says, "Well, watch the dive, and if they get you wet, deduct, pick a number between 1 and 10. And I ended up with the other coaches. All my scores were right in the center. I wasn't the high diving coach. I wasn't the low ball. I was right in the middle. I was actually the average. I couldn't believe it. It was somebody was looking out for me.
So after this 5th year, what did you do as far as finding a living? Did you look for a teaching job, a swimming job? What did you do?
Well, 1974, I remember Jerry Uding coming to, I remember Jerry when he started teaching in the Kenosha district as a 6th grade teacher. But by the time I was in college, he was an assistant personnel director. And he came and visited the university. And I had the appointment, and I can remember getting called in, and he said, I was wondering if you were the Peter Johnson I knew, and we talked about Kenosha. And at that time, he says, we don't really have a social studies position open right now, but we'll keep you in mind. That summer, got a call from personnel in July, mid-July, and Dr. Al Schumacher interviewed me. And we talked and we talked. Actually, I had never met him before, but we definitely had plenty of mutual friends. Kenosha is a big little town, as you well know. So we talked, and Dr. Schumacher said, well, I have an English social studies position at Lance Junior High School. And I said, but Dr. Schumacher, I'm not certified to teach in English. And, he said, don't worry about that. Okay, I didn't worry about it. So I went over to Lance. I interviewed with Don Eels, who was the principal at that time. He told me about the school. I'd gone to the school, so I knew a little bit about the place. And at the end of the interview, he said, I'm going to call downtown and ask them to get a contract ready for you. And I thought, and he said, yeah, you can go down anytime and sign it. And I thought, I'm going to go down right away before they change their mind. And I signed the contract, turned it in. So I started, that fall, I started teaching 7th grade English social studies at Lance Junior High School.
And you retired when? You retired?
1974.
No, retired from
Retired
teaching?
in 1974.
No, you retired from
I'm
teaching.
sorry. I didn't retire in 1974. I retired in 2007.
Okay,
You're throwing too many numbers at me.
So, tell me, from the point of becoming an English social studies teacher at Lance in 1974,
So it's 4.
okay, to retirement, what did you teach and where did you teach during that time?
Most of I spent 13 years at Lance.
Did you continue as an English social studies?
I taught English social studies for several years. Eventually, there was an audit. The DPI, Department of Public Instruction, did an audit of the Kenosha Unified School District, and they realized that I was not certified to teach English. So I had to start going to I went to UWM to get my English certification. Then, for a few years, I taught 8th grade history at Lance. I taught government at Lance. All of a sudden, I wasn't teaching. I didn't have to teach English anymore, but I was almost completed with my English certification. Okay. There was one, let's say, glitch about getting my English certification. I got all the credits. There was one course a 2-credit course. The only D I got in college was music appreciation. I tried. I even took music appreciation as a correspondence course. I just couldn't get. It just didn't click. That's all there was to it. So I never did get my English certification.
And then you kind of aged out anyway and just
yeah. So all of a sudden they needed me at Tremper. I was able to teach economics.
And what year did you go to Tremper?
1987.
Okay.
Fall of '87, I went to Tremper.
And you went there to teach social studies?
Well, I went there to primarily teach economics.
Okay.
And then some history.
All right.
But I was primarily, I would say, you've heard of Econ 101. I taught Econ 50. It was Introduction to Economics.
Okay, and so describe Economics 50 to me. What did they learn?
Oh gosh, Lord John Maynard Keynes would say one thing about economists and all, that if you had 20, it was Winston Churchill that said this, if you had 20 econ teachers or economists in a room and you asked them what color the sky was, you would get 20 different versions of what color that sky is, unless there was John Maynard Keynes in that room, and with he would say on one hand, but on the other hand. So I think economists continue to wonder about what is economics.
Okay, so how did you approach the students in terms of a classroom syllabus?
It was sort of like a consumer ed course, more or less showing them or trying to explain the difference between wants and needs.
Kind of a financial literacy course?
It's financial literacy, how to handle a checkbook, how to apply for loans, where to look for loans, how to stay away from payday loan companies. When the first payday loan company opened up here in Kenosha, I thought, I teach economics. I've heard about these things. I've been serving on the Southern Lakes Credit Union Board of Directors since 1975, and I thought, I want to check this place out. So I went in there, and I ended up asking them how you would get a loan. And they said, well, you need a checking account, a pay stub, and a telephone number. I thought, oh, that's pretty simple. And then the next question I said, what's your annual percentage rate? And they said 595%. And my response was, you're raping your customers. And the person said, no, we're providing them a service. And I said, the only services you're providing is that you're lining your pockets with gold. Our conversation went downhill from there. And then finally they ended up saying, sir, if you don't leave, we're calling the police. That story would be the story that I would share with all my econ students the first day of class.
Okay. So what other means did you use to interest students in
stories?
Economics. Can you have any
stories? Oh, I've got plenty of stories. I mean,
give me a couple.
Well, one of the stories that wants and needs. I was very privileged to be able to have met Herb Cole, and Herb Cole was a very, very special individual. Lots of people don't realize all the things that he's done as in his lifetime, and then after passing, what his charitable trust continues to do. Well, I would tell the students between wants and needs that Herb Cole he drives around in a 20-year-old Buick LeSabre. He could buy a fleet of Bentleys if he wanted, or Lamborghinis, or any vehicle that he's got the ability. But he just gets the car from one spot to the other. I'd say he has a few bucks. He owns the Milwaukee Bucks, and that perks up the athletes in the class. And then I'd say that at the time he still owned the Kohl's department stores, and that would sometimes perk up the girls because going shopping there. So that was an example of one story.
All right, and you also mentioned you did teach some history at
Yes.
Tremper. What class did you actually end up
Usually
teaching there?
Usually it was, over time it was either world history or U.S. history. Near the end, when the computers got in the classroom, I remember I had this honors world history class. It was the only history class that was offered that year at Tremper. And I thought, these were all top-notch students. I thought, they don't need to listen to me talk. I'd give them reading materials, but what we would end up doing, we ended up working on PowerPoint presentations. And they'd have a topic that they'd have to research and put together a PowerPoint presentation. We'd do 3 of them. The first one would be, let's say, a baseline. Because, I mean, if you have Bill Gates's kid in your class doing a PowerPoint presentation, and you have a kid my kid, that, you know, I started this PowerPoint presentation program. I didn't know anything about it. I learned as we went along that they were able to end up doing the research, end up putting out a nice product, and the goal was that they needed to know their project. They needed to know their topic. They would need to, you know, I had one student, actually he was probably, in that class, he was a very intelligent kid, but all the other kids were much more intelligent. And his final project was World War II aircraft, and he jumped into it. He did. He ended up doing his research. He would end up on getting into chat rooms of worldwide chat rooms, that talking to people that were very, very big into aircraft. And I remember him telling in his presentation that he was chatting online with back and forth with a guy from Germany. And the guy from Germany this was going on for several weeks. And the guy from Germany kept on telling him how superior the German Messerschmitts, that's it, how superior that was. And the kid got fed up with him. And he finally, when he was done getting information from him, he ended up saying, and that's why the Germans won the war, correct? Well, that ended the conversation. The kid was blocked, but he felt good about saying it. When he gave that presentation, his entire presentation, it was supposed to be at least a 20-minute presentation. He talked for an hour, and no script on the slides. It was just photos, no notes. The script was in his head, and the prompt was the photo, and he was able to expound on that photo. Many of us have been through these PowerPoint presentations where the presenter reads the screen, and you know, it's time to go to sleep.
Okay. So when you retired in 2007, could you have taught longer, or were you at the age of retirement?
I could have taught. I could have been teaching longer. You know, I had some serious back issues at that time. In fact, the last 9 weeks that I worked, my doctor, my spinal specialist, was giving me medication, and he did not want me to be in the classroom because he didn't want me to end up saying something that I would regret.
So you then retired. What did you do post-retirement or in retirement?
I ended up working. I ended up getting a job, a part-time job, for the Hilton properties up in Milwaukee by the airport, just driving shuttle back and forth. Not full-time, but it was just maybe maybe 16, 24 hours a week.
So you just decided you like to drive and you...
I like to drive, and the hotels the 2 hotels that I was working for, we had a lot of business customers. We had people that were coming from all over the world, and you know, they were pretty. It was interesting work, because you'd only have the people in the van for 5-10 minutes, but you would hear stories from all over the world, you know, from Taiwan, China, Japan, Germany, Sweden, you know.
So would you chat them up, or did they just chat among themselves or between each other?
When they'd get in the van, I'd talk about Milwaukee. I would tell them about the restaurants in the airport area that we would shuttle them to. I would talk about places, museums and other areas of interest in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. You know,
kind of a travel guide?
I was like a concierge, but didn't have the title. In fact, I was actually, you know, as a part-time employee, I was honored by Hilton Corporate for exceptional service to the industry.
Okay,
but
and
I was just being myself.
Okay, so, and how long did you do that?
I did that for 11 years,
Okay.
and I ended up having to stop that because in 2018 I came down with a very aggressive form of lymphoma, which was treated aggressively. So I spent quite a bit of time up in Milwaukee at the Wauwatosa Cancer Center, Frederick Cancer Center, where I'd be there 5 days straight for chemo. I'd be home for 2.5 weeks. I'd be back for 5 days straight, and I had 10 sessions like that. And then I ended up having a 6-week bone marrow transplant.
Okay.
I'm on the green side up now.
It's a good side.
Yes.
So did you get involved with anything else after you retired? You were a part-time driver for the Hilton Group.
Well,
did you get involved in anything else?
I've been involved, for example, in the early part of this century, when Jim Doyle ran for governor the first time. I served on his campaign, the local campaign, using my networking and being able to be involved, reaching out to people in this area and helping the campaign. I've served on Russ Feingold's local campaign committee several times, been involved in different groups over the years. At one time I served on the Lakeshore County's American Red Cross Board. I've been on the credit union board that I mentioned already. Let's see, I was on the CYC board, so my local church board as well. So been involved. Currently, I'm on the Green Ridge Cemetery Board, something that I've been on since the 1980s. I joined that because of the history of the cemetery, and I was the youngest person on the board. The average age of the executive board was 88.
What year was that the average age was?
Oh, as far as when I joined the board?
Well, you joined the board quite early.
In the 80s, sometime
Okay,
in the
right.
80s. But the average age at that time was 88. And what happens when you have an old executive board like that, they all ended up being permanent residents at the cemetery. We needed a new executive board.
Okay.
And by that time, I was retired, and somebody twisted my arm, and the other people that were available took 2 steps back, and I was there, and I said there were certain things that I wanted to have done, and
Was this as chairman of the board?
I'm sorry?
Was this as chairman of the board?
as chairman, I
Okay.
became chairman. So
And so you had conditions upon
I
taking
ended up, I ended up being chairman of the board, which was not a full-time position. It was, more or less running board meetings. And
And what do you do there today?
I'm sorry?
What do you do at the cemetery, Greenwood Cemetery today?
Today, I'm the chief executive officer, I'm the general manager, I'm the bookkeeper, I'm the purchasing agent. I wear a few hats.
Okay. So how did you go from chairman of the board to all of those jobs?
Well, during, some people say I can be relentless, and during my time as becoming the chairman of the board, I discovered that there was some problems, and discovered that the previous manager had embezzled significant funds. So I ended up, the board, not just me, the entire board decided that we needed to make some changes, and we needed to also prosecute, and which we did.
Okay.
And I was just, that was
that is when you became the...
that was when I became general manager and all the other hats. And actually, it was July 15th, 2009. I thought I'd just run the place for a few months until I found somebody that knew what they were doing. I'm still there. So,
And now you know what you're doing.
there are cemeteries that are in the area that when they have questions, they call me. And fortunately, when I stepped in, I had already established a network of cemeterians in Milwaukee, the Forest Home Cemetery, the Highland Memorial Park, the Archdiocese cemeteries, and other cemeteries in the Milwaukee area. So I was able to reach out to individuals in the know.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about Green Ridge Cemetery. What is it? Where is it?
Okay,
What's
Green
its
Ridge
importance?
Cemetery is the oldest cemetery in Kenosha County. Our first burials were February of 1836. It was, when I used to do my walking tours prior to being sick, I would tell people that we have the founders of Kenosha, we have industrialists, we have inventors, we have the blood, sweat, and tears that built Kenosha, and we have a few scoundrels there as well. But we're working on a couple projects. One of them is that we're working on becoming a cemetery arboretum, an accredited cemetery arboretum.
So what is your goal for the cemetery? As you say, you're starting this?
Well, it's to be able to prolong or plan on replacing trees. Trees don't live forever. We've lost over 100 green ash trees. We've lost other trees due to disease and windstorms. And we still have lots of trees in the cemetery. Right now we know that with all the leaves coming down, yep, they're there, but we are working on a program to replenish so that, that 20 years from now we'll have younger trees replacing the older trees that die.
And as an arboretum, is the point to identify these trees and create some kind
we're
of
working. We have a committee that's actually working on that project, and they will be tagged. We'll have what they are, and we're hoping to be able to put together a QR code for every one of them, so people can find it. They can see what the tree looks like. If they're thinking about planting that sort of a tree in their yard, they'll have the ability to, look and see what it looks like as a mature tree. And and just the fact they're going to be, good trees. Trees are good for the environment. We've also working along the north end of the cemetery. We're working on a prairie restoration, a native plant project, where that area along what they call Snake Drive, that's the curvy road along the north side of the cemetery. That's between the cemetery and Baker Park. There's an area there that's very difficult to maintain, and that's our native plant project.
And then what's the goal of these projects? What do
At the
you hope to
environment.
accomplish?
I mean, what's the...
No, I mean of the whole cemetery as a whole. What is the
What is our goal?
Yeah.
We want to be able to have a restful, peaceful place for people to enjoy. That they can come and walk through the cemetery, enjoy the views, enjoy the wildlife. We have owls, we have skunks, we have fox. Every once in a while we get deer in there. We have some red-tailed hawks, different birds of all sorts of varieties. It's just 33 acres of a pleasant place that is environmentally friendly and something that ecologically is going to benefit the community.
And was this something that you became really interested in, or how did you just, I know you kind of got dropped into the place. Was this something you really desired to do?
I'm going to make a mention of a deceased friend of mine, somebody I believe you know as well, Phil Sanders. Phil was a longtime friend of the family, friend of mine. I can remember that shortly before he passed, I visited him at his apartment, and Phil ended up saying, "Peter, if you can have a vocation and an avocation, you're pretty darn lucky." And I feel that the cemetery is not only a vocation for me, but it's an avocation. And I don't sit and watch TV. I like a drink or two, but I'm not spending days in and days out at a bar. I'm active, and the work I'm doing at that cemetery is making sure that it will be a good running operation for years to come, well after I'm gone.
Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.